Five, four, three, two, one. We are live. Coming to you live as Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, great to have you on board. This is a really interesting show. It's going to get us right down to the brass tacks, not of the, snapshot polls, but we're going to look at actual votes that have been cast.
Yeah, no polls, none of that nonsense. Real votes, you know.
Real
Um,
votes. And, the media has been really misleading us. Oh, we're 21 days or so from the election. That's wrong, isn't it, Sam? The election started
yeah,
about a week ago. 500, excuse me, 5.5 approximately million votes already cast, including in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, about a million votes cast in those critical swing states.
right.
So the idea, that the election is still weeks away just isn't true. The election is with us. And, again, I'm not a big on polls on this is way within the error margin for what it's worth. NBC News, which compiles the early votes, also did a poll, and a majority of voters, potential voters, however you want to characterize them, have said they intend to vote early. A very small majority, just over 50%, but still a majority. And at least according to the poll, they are overwhelmingly Democratic, whereas those who plan on voting on election day are overwhelmingly Republican. But the truth is, have you heard the old saying, a
W-
bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, Sam?
You just
That's a
asked
really
me. You
old
just
saying.
asked me generally if I've heard the old saying. I mean, how many? There could be millions of old sayings. I don't know what old saying you're referring to.
Well, I just said it. Have you heard it?
No,
I'm sure you have.
no, I
A
haven't.
bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That's apropos of early voting. Here's the thing. Early voting, it's it's in the box already. It's done. It's cast. It's finished. Over. Whereas a lot can happen on election day to stop people from voting, right? There can be bad
Yeah,
weather, family emergencies, people get sick. They just get sick and tired of the campaign, in another 3 weeks and decide not to vote. I would guess, if I had to guess, and take it for what it's worth, but my instincts are usually pretty good. There's going to be at least a 10% fall off of those who claim
wow.
they are going to vote on election day. Whereas once your vote is in,
It's in.
unless they invalidate it, it's done. Now, a big,
Whoa.
whoa, I'm okay.
Good.
Probably should get a drink. But a
Oh,
big decision out of Georgia. Have you heard this one, Sam, about meddling with the vote?
yes, I believe a judge said that they can no longer delay or refuse to certify the election, correct? Election workers.
Right. They have a purely ministerial duty. All they've got to do is certify the votes that come in. They can't look behind them. They can't question them. They can't delay them. Doesn't mean they won't try. Some of these folks, as we know, are not particular great sticklers for the law. So, but the judge's decision is pretty clear. It may not be the final decision, though, because I presume Republicans will appeal this up the line, and you've got a very Republican Supreme Court. I think the judge who made this decision, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, was the same judge who is in the Fannie Willis RICO case.
I have no idea. I just saw the
I
headline
think
about.
so. I think it's the same local judge, but it'll have to go pretty quickly up the line for this decision to be reversed. And you know, we've seen purely political decisions before, but clearly the judge uh, pointed out that the law is not ambiguous. That these local election administrators have but one job, and that is to certify the votes as they come in and not meddle with the verdict of the people. Now,
Well, that's
we
that's
actually have, go
that's
ahead,
that's great news. I know a lot of our audience has been really worried about shenanigans in the election. That's really great news.
assuming it holds. It's terrific news. And Georgia is very much a state that's up for grabs in this election. The truth is, Republicans have to win Georgia. Democrats win Georgia, the odds are overwhelming that they're going to win the election because they're stronger than the Republicans in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Republicans really need North Carolina and Georgia, two states that are very much up in the air. And unfortunately, because of, again, further, Republican motivated delays, we don't have much in the way of early votes yet from Georgia or North Carolina, but we have a lot of votes in from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and they're consistent with the poll, showing even a greater gap between Republicans and Democrats in the early voting than the polls would indicate. Here's the national totals. This is NBC News, 5.439 early votes that they've already tallied, and they're probably a little behind. It may be closer to 6 million by now,
Right.
but that's a lot of votes.
Yeah.
And they are heavily concentrated in the three so-called blue wall states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And nationally, Democrats are ahead 51% to 33% for Republicans,
Right.
and then 16% for others, presuming that, 90% plus of Republicans and Democrats who vote early will vote in accord with their party ticket, right? They're not going to be much defection. So a lot's going to depend upon what happens with that other vote. But even if it splits evenly, that's going to be 59-41
Right.
Democrat, an 18-point lead. The other thing that's interesting, remember I talked about the fact that a lot of the polls are misleading because they don't really take into account the fact that women are going to be the majority
Right.
of the electorate, right? Well,
Right.
at least on the early voting, 53% women, 45% men, 2% unknown, who I presume are probably binary, non-binary or transgender people who, should be counted along with the women majority because
Right.
those folks are not going to vote Republican. All
Right.
right, let's look at the swing states that really matter
Okay.
at this point, unfortunately. So we'll start with Michigan,
Yep.
609,000 ballots.
Pretty
That's a
good.
lot of ballots. And there's, 3 weeks people can vote early as well.
Yeah.
56, oh, I have a gender. I want to get it party. Yeah. 57% Democrats, 34% Republicans, 9% others. Everybody says, oh, the swing states are not going to do as well for the Democrats as the national totals, right? You've heard all this nonsense. Democrats have to win the national by at least 4 points. Well, this is the first time we actually have data from real voters. It's,
Right.
it's a small minority, but it's not nothing,
Right.
609,000. The gap in partisanship is substantially greater in Michigan than the national. The national
Right.
is an 18-point gap. Michigan, it's 57-34-9. That's a 23-point gap, not counting anything that might happen with the others. That's
Right.
pretty significant. Now
Yeah.
we'll go ahead.
I just was agreeing with you.
Yeah. Wisconsin is really strange, I
Right.
have to say. 41%, only 227 ballots, nowhere near what Michigan is. Michigan's a bigger state, but still, it's got almost 3 times as many ballots. So
Right.
it's not a huge number, but it's really strange. Have you seen these numbers?
I'm looking at them right now, Dad.
41%. Yeah. Oh, you got them up.
I got them up.
Way
Everybody,
ahead of me as always, right?
everybody at home can see it too.
Wow. 41% other, 40% Democrats, 19% Republicans. Let's again presume the others split, okay?
Right.
That would make it still 60, won 39 Democrats,
Yeah.
a 22-point gap, again, much greater than the national. And the one that's most incredible is Pennsylvania, 69% Democrats, 23% Republicans, 8% others. Let's again presume the others split. That'll be 74% to 27%. That's an amazing gap,
Yeah.
47-point gap.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of ballots, 416,652 ballots. Unfortunately, because of various delays, we don't have much from North Carolina and Georgia, only 57,000 some odd ballots in North Carolina, really nothing.
Yeah.
37% Democrats, 36% other, 27% Republicans. Again, no matter how you slice it, whether
Yeah.
it's like Pennsylvania with huge Democrats or like Wisconsin and North Carolina with most of the voters Democrat and others, Republicans are way behind.
Yeah.
And Georgia, nothing. It's only
12,000.
1,873
But the good
ballots.
news about Georgia was that they had record early voting for their first day.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
people are really anxious to get out and vote. And kind of Republicans have, Trump anyway, made a big strategic mistake by denouncing mail-in
Yeah, of
and early.
course. Yeah.
It's fraud, it's rigged. Republicans have been trying to walk that back, but it's hard to walk back as a Republican what Donald Trump has to say.
And I think I
All right.
said last week, you reap what you sow. You know, you spent years and years undermining our election process, undermining early voting and mail-in voting. It's going to hurt you in the end. It's your own fault.
All right. I got to take a minute to get a drink. You fill the air. You got a
Okay.
lot to say.
Filling the air. All right. So,
Tell
looking at
them
this
about next Thursday with your mom.
next Thursday, we are hoping to do the climate change Vote Climate US PAC episode. The interesting thing about this too is also that 37 million mail-in and early person votes have been requested nationally. That's like a fourth of the voting electorate. That's a crap ton of people. The early voting numbers, if you're a Democrat, if you're Harris, if you're a supporter of hers, these numbers are looking pretty good. Again, on the other side of things, the day of voting is probably going to lean Republican. But still, if you're looking at these numbers, they're pretty drastic, as my dad was saying. And anything can happen on election day. The biggest Trump supporter in the world, a family emergency can happen. You never know. And they don't show up to the polls, and they're in trouble. So, also, if you're Allan Lichtman, these look pretty good for your prediction, right, Dad?
Absolutely. And I'm looking pretty good for my hair too, but it's getting a little out of control. Of course, it's not a wig, and I do have a hair appointment Thursday morning. So for the next show, you'll see my hair all spiffed up. And I
Who
have to
cares
say,
about
I'm
your
really
hair?
grateful that my hair can grow at age 77 this much.
Who cares about your hair?
I get a lot of stuff about my hair
Well,
in
yeah.
comments, I'll tell you. Not so much from our people who are a lot more sophisticated than that, but people think the fact that I've got all this hair somehow invalidates my predictions. The crazy stuff we hear is just beyond belief,
But
isn't it,
why would
Sam?
people care if you had a hair appointment on Thursday? That's what I'm wondering.
Because they know that this huge amount of hair will not persist.
Oh, I see. What are you doing right now? Are you taking medicine?
I took a couple of Advil. I have a little bit of a migraine aura.
Oh, no.
I'm good. I've been working hard.
Yeah.
What George W. Bush said, working hard at the presidency. Well, maybe not the presidency, but I would say I've estimated this year over 300 commentaries and interviews. That's
Move
not easy
move to
for an
your
old
right a
guy.
little bit, Dad.
What's that?
Move to your right. You're all the way on the left side of the frame. A little bit more. A little bit
I
more.
want to say one more thing. I know Sam doesn't entirely agree with me on this, but you probably all know this. A couple of folks got ill. They didn't have their arena air conditioned for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe Trump wouldn't pay for it. Who knows? He doesn't pay anyway. He owes bills, I think, from 2016 to various municipalities. Any rate, after that, he says, "Who wants to?" It was a town hall Q&A. Supposedly, he says, "You know, who cares about questions anyway, right?" And then he goes into a 39-minute pause, listening to music and swaying to the music, including lots of music, that folks who produced the music said you can't use. You're not supposed. Of course, Trump doesn't care. He's using it anyway. I thought it was an entirely bizarre kind of thing. I've never seen anything like that before. And I've been studying politics since the founding. I've never seen a candidate in the middle of a Q&A say, "Who cares about Q&A?" and then sway to music, even those who can sway better than Trump. I guarantee to you, Sam, if Biden had done that, there would be a firestorm of media criticism. They'd probably drive him out of the country. But somehow, because Trump does so many crazy things, says so many crazy things, people are inured to it. He constantly seems to get a pass. That's all I'll say about it.
My only point, so I watched the full ending, unedited version. I found it weird, but not like crazy weird. I mean, he had been going for a long time already. It wasn't like he did that, in the middle of it. He'd been going for like an hour and a half already.
Yeah, but Trump usually goes for 3 hours,
I
as you
know,
know.
but like it didn't seem that weird to me. It seemed like they were sort of closing out, and he just started playing a bunch of songs and was kind of
They weren't
dancing.
closing out. He said, "Let's stop. Who cares about questions?" And remember, this is consistent. He ducked the Fox News debate. He ducked the 60-minute interview. He ducked the CNBC interview. This is a guy who doesn't want to have to answer questions. And I heard him answer some question. I forget where it was the other day, saying, "Oh, the January 6th was peaceful patriots, and the police officers just let them in to the Capitol." This is consistent with Trump saying, "Don't believe what you see and hear, only believe what I tell you." 140 Capitol police officers were injured. There were a number of deaths, directly or indirectly. Nobody was letting in these rioters. They were battling and fighting their way in, injuring brave Capitol Police along the way. I don't know how Trump gets away with this stuff. Anyone else, as I said, would be drummed out of the country.
I agree with that generally speaking. I don't. I think of the list of crazy and terrible things Trump has done, this this one's pretty low. I just don't think
I
it.
don't agree because I think it's so visual, so visceral. It's not just a comment, it's something you can see. And by the way, uh, at first, the media was kind of taking your tack, but I've just recently seen some within the media really go after Trump on this. Just another example of so many of a guy who's just doesn't have it anymore. It's just not with it.
Maybe so. I don't think it was that big of a deal. I do agree that if Biden did that, the entire Republican Party would be up in arms. But it's
And so would the media.
yeah, I do agree with
Yeah.
that. But
He stumbled in a debate and, it was the end of the world. Imagine if he had done this.
well, the debate was pretty bad. Let's
It
not.
was pretty bad, but 2 weeks they hammered him for the debate. If he had done this, oh my God, there would be a firestorm, not just from the Republicans, but from the media as well. You know that.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I think you are right about that. Dad, we have 7,000 people watching.
Nice. And I am ready for their questions and comments. I want
Okay.
to say one more thing,
Okay.
about this early voting. We saw how Republicans were trying to authorize local election deniers to meddle in the results. Republicans, and most people don't know this, have been filing lawsuits all over the country or passing laws where they control the government to make it as hard as possible to cast an early vote, to put all kinds of onerous requirements on what you have to do to get an absentee ballot through, truncating the deadlines for the receipt of absentee ballots, purging people off the registration rolls. You know, They are doing everything in their power to make it harder for you to exercise your democratic franchise.
There you go. All right, Dad. You ready to get some questions?
I'm always ready, particularly when we have 7,000 viewers, and remind them what they need to do to help us out.
So, members and donations have priority on questions on non-sponsored streams. So, if you want your question to get in line, we get so many questions we can't answer all of them, even donations or members. But if you want priority on questions, you got to become a member or donate on a non-sponsored stream. Don't forget to like this stream. We've got 7,500 people watching, Dad. Only 1,300 likes. So make sure you like this stream. He is at Allan Lichtman on Instagram, TikTok, and X. I'm at Sammy Licht on YouTube and Instagram. All right, your
And
first
I'm hanging in there with a migraine aura, so any support you can give us would be great.
I have a little bit of a headache too. I'm not gonna lie. So maybe we're on the same. Maybe we're on, but we're here for the people, Dad. No matter what.
That's why I'm here no matter what, and I'm ready to go.
All right.
Got my Gatorade this time. Not
Okay.
the
That's a
Coke.
switch up. Usually it's diet soda or a seltzer
I'm
water.
trying to switch up, and our fans have been very helpful making suggestions for me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Our first question is thousands and thousands of mail in ballots for states like Pennsylvania, as we just said, have skyrocketed for Democratic voters. Is this a sign that states like this will be blue?
I can't say it proves that states would be blue, but it's certainly a sign that it's likely that these states would be blue. As I said, the polls in 2016 underestimated Republican voting strength. It's my view, based on what I saw from 2022 to 2024, that the polls are now underestimating Democratic voting strength. As we saw in the special election for the congressional seat in New York held by the disgraced George Santos, the Democrat outperformed the poll right before the election by 7 points. It's not going to take 7 points. Even if the polls are off by a point or two, the Democrats are going to do a point or two better than the polls. They will sweep Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Joe Horsney, for they just gifted 10 memberships. Thank you so much.
Nice.
That's
Thank you.
very nice of you. Member PV Kip 999 says, "Do you think Elon Musk will succeed in making a red wave by paying people to vote for Donald Trump?" Have you heard about this? I haven't heard about this.
I'm not. I've heard about it. I can't verify it. That's those kind of tactics never work. Uh, First of all, it's flatly illegal, but that's never stopped them before. But I haven't heard that this is a widespread successful effort. But if he even is trying it, that could not be more reprehensible. Having 100+ billionaire trying to buy off our democracy is absolutely contrary to all our democratic traditions and reprehensible.
Right. Rob Z says, "Is it true that in Pennsylvania they will be counting in-person votes first, then absentee and mail-in, thus creating a red mirage scenario?"
That's what happened last time, and I think it's going to happen again. Remember, Trump gets up and says, I won, even when, a very substantial proportion of the ballots were not in, and all of us knew they would be very heavily for Biden. So if there's a red mirage again, which there could be, expect Donald Trump to get up and say, I won. And then when he loses, say, it was all rigged. I'm not going to accept it. But remember, in 2020, Donald Trump was president and had all the powers of the presidency. If he loses this time, he's just a private citizen, and he's not going to be able to do a lot of the things he was able to do in 2020. The one joker that really worries me is the Supreme Court. Supreme Court was excellent in 2020 and 2021. They pretty much did not even accept to hear any of the bogus election challenges. But the Supreme Court seems to have become more aggressive these days, so I am a little worried.
We just hit 8,200 people watching, Dad.
That's great.
Alan Taylor says, What percentage of the black vote does Kamala need to win?
Impossible to say because she's apparently made inroads into the white, particularly the white college educated vote. Now, you've all heard all this panic, Democrats are losing black support, particularly among black men. And of course, that's based on polls. And when you're polling a tiny segment of the electorate like that, black men are like, 5% of the electorate, the error margin is going to be enormous. We've also heard before about Democrats losing black support, but somehow when they get to vote, as opposed to just saying something to a pollster, uh, black people come back to the Democratic Party. I suspect her percentages among Democrats, among black people, are not going to be much different from those of the last two elections, somewhere in the high 80% range.
Member Megan Frankie says, what drives voter turnout? Do the keys alone explain it, or is a confluence of factors including the election campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, the keys are integral. They take into account everything that goes into an election: turnout, partisanship, money. Everything is all encompassed in the integral parameters of the keys, but they never break it down because you can't predict an election by breaking it down into its components, like I said, and many factors go into turnout, how inspired voters are, what kind of get out the vote effort is going on in their local communities, uh, what issues drive them, whole what kind of electoral rules are present in their state. So no one thing ever drives turnout, and it's not, of course, predictable in advance, and it's not a key.
Oh, that was a sudden stop. I didn't realize you were done.
Sometimes, I'm quick.
Yeah. Trey Christopher Young says, because we're in such a polarized political climate, do you think there will ever be a candidate that can get the charisma key to fall in their favor?
I've been asked that, and you've heard many times my second favorite quote, right, from the great Benjamin Disraeli, the Jewish Prime Minister of England. Finality is not a word we use in politics. I never want to say never, but I think it's difficult given how extreme our politics have become. Now, unexpected changes could arise. You know, I wrote extensively about the election of 1932 and 1928. There were a whole book about that. And after 1928, everybody, all the political analysts, both Republicans and Democrats, thought Republicans would rule forever. They had been so dominant, winning three presidential elections by an average margin of almost 20 points, unheard of today. They controlled everything outside the old Democratic South. And then almost overnight, just in 3 years, with the onset of the Great Depression, everything politically in America changed.
Oops, I went to a black screen by accident. Shay Hendricks says, Dr. Lichtman, there's a video released by Rebel HQ called Harris Will Beat Trump Decisively. Consider watching it and giving your analysis. They don't directly mention you, but they give a critique of the polls. Have you seen that, Dad? Probably not.
I have not. I have not looked at a lot of this. Let me tell you how, the demands of my time are immense, and I actually have a job too. I'm still in my 51st year of teaching at American University, but I've seen headlines for a number of these sites claiming Harris will win in a landslide. As you know, the keys don't predict margins. They just predict winners and losers.
Right. Thank you, Jacobs Travail, for fighting the good fight. They're fighting the false narrative that you predicted only the popular vote in 2016. So thank you,
Oh my
Jacob.
God, are they still
Yeah,
perpetrating that
yeah.
garbage? I can't believe it. Yeah, I
Um,
fooled Donald Trump, who sent me a letter of congratulations. I fooled Chris Cillizza, the editor of the political section of the Washington Post, who said, when I look back at 2016, I think of three things: Lichtman, Lichtman, and Lichtman. who called Trump's win when nobody else was doing it. Oh my God.
And you predicted his impeachment too. And just to say, I
And I
was
predicted, right. And that's documented from Peter Stevenson, who did my September 23rd interview. I repeated it on Fox News. If I had only been predicting the popular vote, Fox News would have been all over me. But I made it crystal clear I was predicting Trump was going to win the election.
there's
And
an
right here is my letter of congratulations from him.
Yeah, as I said last week, as a first-hand accountant, I remember specifically you having this conversation saying you're not going to predict a popular vote. You need to just predict a winner. Obviously, you can't deal with the margins of the electoral college because the system doesn't deal with that. So,
Right, I don't deal state by state.
right.
And you remember how anguished I was in saying Trump was going to be the next president.
Yes. Um, we will be live streaming the election, right, Dad? Is that an official from you? Or
That's up to you.
oh, it is I mean, I'm
You're the
I'm
technical guy. Can we do that?
yeah, of course.
That'd be great. Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Um, Derek Taylor says there are a lot of pollsters saying that the Republicans are way ahead than usual in early voting. Have you been in this situation before where people are writing off Democratic nominee and the Democratic candidate won? I don't know if we're seeing that, are we?
Well, yes and no. The problem is there's no basis of comparison. We had the pandemic in 2020, so there was an enormous upsurge of early voting. There hasn't been, of course, now that it's not a pandemic, a similar upsurge. So, in that sense, early voting and mail in voting is going to probably be lower than 2020, but probably higher than 2016, although it's 8 years ago. So, it's tough to make a comparison. But certainly the margins overwhelmingly favor Democrats.
Right. We got 9,000 people watching. Wow, this today's stream's
Nice.
really popping off. I don't know why, but hey, thank you to all 9,000 of you. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to
I
the
know why
channel.
it's popping off because, we don't just give them the conventional pop.
No pap here.
Oh, pop here. And we don't give them just partisanship. We tell them like it is.
Ain't no doubt. But I mean, you have to admit some of our analysis is pretty left leaning. I mean,
I have my political views, but you know what? I didn't like Trump any better in 2016 when I predicted his win than I do today when I predicted his loss. And
right.
yes, I'm very critical of Trump, but I also give our viewers a lot of historical analysis and a lot
Yeah,
of just straightforward political information.
I agree. Miles Wolf wants to know, have you seen any of the Senate debates and do you have any thoughts on any of them?
I really have not been following the Senate debates or the Senate elections. I have my hands full, analyzing the presidential elections. I think we've talked about this before, and I've recommended the Cook Political Report, headed by my old buddy who I've known for many decades, Charlie Cook, way back in 1991 when I came out with my first of I think it's 8 or 9 editions of the Keys to the White House. We called it the Keys to the Presidency back then. Charlie Cook came to the book party and introduced the book.
Ramiro Farragon says, should Kamala be expecting a last minute surge from Trump?
Not necessarily, except of course, Trump is going to get more election day votes than Harris, and Harris is going to get a lot more early votes than Trump. But, you know, you don't usually get, some kind of strange surge right before the election.
Philip H says hundreds of thousands more Trump supporters died from COVID than Democrats. Do you
Correct.
expect this to make a difference in 2024?
Doesn't seem to have penetrated. What amazes me even more is who are the folks that are getting hit most by the ravages of climate change, by the storms, the tornadoes, the floods, the drought? Who are they, Sam? Are they the people in New York City?
No.
No, they're the mostly rural people who are Trump voters. And somehow they can't conceive of the fact that this is not accidental. It is deeply and directly related to catastrophic climate change. Moreover, can't they see that Trump has fundamentally impeded ability to rescue them, to make them whole by politicizing the rescue operation and claiming Democrats are manipulating it? I just saw some information saying FEMA had to cut back some of its rescue and rehabilitation efforts because of threats from armed people. Unbelievable. Wasn't it MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who thinks, Jews are shooting space lasers at us, at America, who said, that the Biden administration is manipulating the weather?
She's pretty nuts. Um, Julie Larson wants to know, is it true that polls are so skewed because for every 20 Republican polls, there's only one Democratic poll? Is that right?
I'm not sure of that ratio, but there are definitely more Republican polls than Democratic polls. 538, which is probably, the best at sifting through the polls, does rate the polls and downgrades the partisan polls. So I'm not sure that's an issue, but it's not the root of it. I think I've explained many, many times the problems with polls above and beyond the plus and minus 3% statistical error, right, Sam?
Correct, sir.
Do I need to
Um,
do that again?
no.
Okay.
Watch some of our previous episodes if you're wondering. IPSA EST says, I read that. I guess we already talked about this. They said 15 million people had voted by this time in the last election cycle, but you're saying that's because of COVID.
Yeah, that was, an absolute, extraordinary outlier situation for which you can't be comparable.
Right. Junaid Naik says, how do we get money out of politics after cases like Citizen United, Buckley versus Vallejo, etc.?
Very smart comment. The root of all evil is Buckley v. Vallejo way back in the 1970s. That spawned Citizens United and other decisions because the conservative Supreme Court back then equated money with speech, and thus money was protected by the First Amendment. That makes it essentially impossible to have any kind of effective control over money in politics. It would probably take either a constitutional amendment or a complete transformation of the Supreme Court to make that possible. As we stand now, it's a reversal of the old golden rule. Those who have the gold rule.
Dealing with Dylan says, would it be fair to characterize Harris in the same vein as the Clinton slash Obama New Democrats? Also, do you think an earnest New Dealer Dem could turn a key? Any candidates in history post FDR that could have been strong?
I think you're absolutely right. She's, a middle of the road, mainstream Democrat. You have absurd attacks on her. She's a socialist. She's a commie. She's a deranged radical. We need to get them. If anyone else had said this, again, they would be drummed out of the country. Imagine if Biden had said this. I need to call out the military to deal with the my lunatic opposition. Can you imagine a presidential candidate wanting to use the military against U.S. citizens who just want to vote? Our outrage level has become so diminished that it doesn't seem to even matter how outrageous and dangerous what Trump is saying. And I'm going to say it again, even though I've said it so many times. It's not just the evil people who wreak havoc on this world. It's the good people who don't do enough to stop them. And that's what's happening in America right now. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the good people aren't doing nearly enough of what they need to do to stop this from happening.
Kurt Hunter says, I know it won't affect the keys because you already turned the foreign policy failure key against the incumbent party. But what is your take about Biden wanting conditions in Gaza to improve, or Israel may not receive more money or weapons?
I think he's doing the right thing. I don't think it's going to, This is the Gaza issue is such a disaster. As I said, I've already turned it against the administration. I'm not sure how it could become any more of a disaster. You have two absolutely disastrous adversaries. Hamas, a terrorist organization on the one hand, and the belligerent Netanyahu, the Donald Trump of Israel, who's applauded by the American right, who has made Israel a pariah in the world. Israel needs allies, and he is destroying any relationship with Israel's allies that they previously had. He seems to have no regard for human life and human suffering, and there's no end. There's no end to what he's doing. As you've heard me say before, 70 years ago, Dwight Eisenhower said, there is no military solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and neither side seems to know that.
Justin Ackerman says, Dr. Lichtman, if I donate and ask you a question, will you respond with, quote, who cares about donations and questions, and start dancing to a song you don't have permission to use? Go ahead.
You will not see me dancing.
Let's just see a little dance real quick.
No, 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 no. No one should be subjected to a 77 or 78 person dancing. Only someone as deranged as Donald Trump would dare subject people to that.
I want to see you dance, man.
You'll have to, get some old clips.
Damn. All right. Alistair Fennell says, will Dr. Lichtman appear on The Breakfast Club? Do you even know what The Breakfast Club is, Dad?
No.
It's like a New York City hip-hop radio station's morning show. But they often have...
Sure, I would.
Yeah.
Sure I would. If they asked me. I've been asked, as I said, I've done over 300, maybe even five, I don't know how many, hundreds of interviews this year. And I'm not even sure who they all were. I try to give everyone a shot. I almost never turn down anyone except the Russians, who I will give interviews with when they get out of Ukraine. But other than that, I pretty much give interviews to everyone, including Newsmax, right? The far right-wing news outlet. I've given interviews to them. So I may have given some interviews to some hip-hop stations for all I know.
Yeah, you might have. You might not even know that you did.
That's correct.
Oh, there's a siren going past me. All right, our first Discord question of the night. If you want to join our Discord and or our Reddit, you can do so. It's in the description of this video. This is a doozy, Dad. I haven't even read it yet, but it's long. You ready?
Yeah, but try not to make it too long because we have a lot of people who want to ask questions.
I don't know how to not to make it
You
long.
abbreviate it?
I haven't read it yet.
All right, go ahead.
All right. I would like you. Here we go. I would like you to address something from your book, The Keys to the White House, 1996. Okay, etc.
I don't even remember that book. Are you kidding me?
On page 33, you wrote about.
Oh, come on.
All right, what do you want me to do?
I think I remember what's on page 33. What is that? 30, almost 30 years ago?
What do you want me to do? Skip this question?
No, go ahead.
Let me at least read it.
I'll get a flash of memory.
Let me at least read it. You can skip it after you hear it, okay?
All right.
On page 33, you wrote about the short-term economy key. The 1992 experience combined with 1960 and 1980 suggest a modified interpretation of key 5. In the initial key system, the emphasis was on the last majority turn of the economy, either upward or downward. However, the most recent election underscores the importance of public perception in assessing the short-term economy keys. End of quote.
Yes, I do remember that now.
Okay.
I was talking about 1992, a very tricky call. And here's what happened. In 1992, the National Bureau of Economic Research declared a recession. And 75 to 80% of Americans, right up to the election, agreed that there was still a recession, even though arguably the recession had ended. But it was only 7 weeks later that the NBER, after the election, informed Americans that the recession was over. And I said, if that had come a few months earlier, I might not have turned that key. But it wasn't just public perception, it was the combination of a sitting verdict of a recession plus not like 50% or 48%, but 75 to 80% thinking we're still in the recession. That's what that was all about. God, I can't believe I remembered that.
I can't either.
Thanks to
Um,
our audience member for jogging an old man's memory.
there you go. FJ Marcliffe with a $50 donation. Thank you so much for that, FJ. They says, I do not. Oh, let me change the. Oh, we are changed. Okay, sorry. Um, they say I do not think that that Trump's performance at the campaign in South Dakota was him simply refusing to answer questions. His body language signaled that he was having cognitive issues. We don't know that. I don't think we know
I'm
that.
not a psychologist, but look, I've been around for a very long time. I've seen hundreds of
Since the
politicians,
Stone Age, right?
pretty much, at least since Abraham Lincoln,
Right,
one of my old buddies.
right.
It's not just that. There's like 10 or 20 instances that are indicative of cognitive decline. I was certainly willing to say, yes, Biden's performance was horrible. It is a sign of cognitive decline, but there's so many indications that Trump is in cognitive decline. I've been in communication. There's this whole group of experts who are psychologists centered on Yale University, and they agree that Trump has severe mental health issues. It's not just me.
All right. I don't know. I didn't like when people say that. I didn't like when people say that Biden was demented. I also don't like when people say that Trump is demented
I don't
because
think he's demented. I don't think Biden's demented either, but I do think, they have both have cognitive issues. And Trump, it's not just cognitive issues, it's, you know, egomaniacal issues. Psychologists have words for this, extreme narcissism or something like that. Your sister, who is a psychiatrist, instructs me on some of those words. So I think it's not just cognitive issues with Trump; it's health issues as well. But
def.
don't take my word for it. I don't want to opine on areas that I'm not an expert, but lots of psychiatrists have.
All right. He's definitely an egomaniac narcissist. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt.
Jamie C. and Joan Umshed, thank you for your donations. We've talked a lot about this in previous episodes. They're asking about Trump trying to steal the election and SCOTUS. We talked a lot about this, so I would urge you to check out our past episodes. Thank you to Rose, Anita for your donations. Thank you, Donna W. The Nerd Nest says, could Trump, okay, another challenge. Could Trump challenge the election enough and get enough electors disqualified to force a contingent election which Trump will win? I haven't heard that before.
Well, that's what he tried to do in 2020. He wanted Mike Pence to break the Constitution, break the law, and unilaterally toss out enough votes so Biden would not get a majority. Can't win with a plurality. After a majority electoral college, the election would then go where, Sam, if no one got a majority of the electoral college? Who would
Congress.
then Congress, the House, and how many votes would each state have?
One.
One. And Republicans controlled 26 states. So the idea was, would throw it to the House and they would elect Trump. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they were trying to do. I don't see how, they can do it this time since it's Vice President Harris who's counting the votes.
Amy Foote
I don't
says,
think they're going to get votes thrown out in the courts either. Sometimes it takes me a beat to
yeah,
finish.
yeah. Amy Foote says, have you read Accidental Presidents by Jared Cohen? In your opinion, who was the most successful of the 8 people who succeeded presidencies when an incumbent passed away or resigned?
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt probably, ranked as a near great president.
Craig Reeves says, do you think early voting will affect battleground state polls since people who already voted may be less likely to answer polls?
It certainly could, although the chances of picking up a substantial percentage of early voters in these polls is pretty small. But again, a tiny movement directionally in the polls can make all the difference. You've heard me say this before. I go back maybe not to Abe Lincoln, but at least to Kennedy Nixon. And there was a poll once every couple of weeks and nobody cares. Now there's a poll every 2 hours and the media jumps on it as though it's, a revelation from Mount Olympus. One of my favorite ones was a couple of weeks ago. Trump moved ahead by 1 point, well within the noise of the polls. Big headlines. Trump takes the lead in the election. Of course, totally bogus.
Right.
But you don't even have to get out of bed in the morning to write a story about the polls. Nothing could be easier.
Right. Andrew R. Arliger says, some of these people's names are hard to pronounce. How would you
Maybe you need practice. You need
how,
practice. You
how would
should,
you pronounce this, Dad? Arhelger.
I have no idea.
Okay. Could a GOP controlled Senate keep Harris's SCOTUS vacancy on hold indefinitely, hypothetically?
Well, it's a little more certain than hypothetical. We saw this happen with Merrick Garland. Garland was nominated many months before the election, and the Republicans wouldn't even give him a hearing, much less a vote. And then when Amy Coney Barrett came up just a couple of weeks before the election, boom, they rammed her through. So absolutely, they could put a Harris nomination on the deep freeze as long as they want.
What would their justification be for it, you think?
What do they need a justification?
Yeah,
Who cares? As Commodore Vanderbilt, one of the richest men of the 19th century, who controlled a lot of politicians, said, you know, I got the power, ain't I? And that's all that matters.
true. Fox Sparrow says, do you think that Putin slash Russia, Iran, China, North Korea are going to try to cause international chaos to get Trump elected? Would it work?
I don't think it'll work, but I wouldn't put it past them. Absolutely not. These bad actors around the world are just itching for Trump to get elected because he knows they'll give him a green light to do what they're. So he said that. If NATO nations don't pay their share, well, NATO was not a dues paying nation. It had to do with the percentage of defense spending they had. But if they don't meet some goal that I have in mind, Putin can do anything he wants to NATO. Can you imagine an American president, after all these years of collective security, giving Putin a green light to do anything he wants to our NATO allies? So, dictators around, and Orban is his buddy, the dictator in Hungary. Dictators are just salivating in the hope that Donald Trump gets elected.
Vacuum Tubes for Hi-Fi says, in the Civil War, did Union General George B. McClellan have Southern sympathies? If so, is this why he was not particularly aggressive when he should have been? And is this why he ran as president in 1864 against Lincoln?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I do think he had Southern sympathies, no question. I also think he was an inherently cautious, very timid general. And he certainly ran against Lincoln in 1864 as pretty much the candidate of slavery and the South. If he had won, he would have called off the troops, just let the Confederacy exist, let slavery persist. Who knows when it would have been eliminated? And for a long time, Lincoln thought he was going to lose. He even wrote a letter and sealed it saying, I expect to lose, but I hope we will continue this war effort. It was only late Union victories by Sherman in Atlanta and Sheridan in Virginia that probably turned a couple of keys and saved Lincoln's election. Last time, 1864, late events, well, it was the middle of a war, civil war, changed some keys.
Thank you all for the donations. We're running out of time, so save your money for next week. Dr. Ash says, when the Dems lost the majority policy change in 2016, what could they have done to turn this key in their favor?
Would have been very difficult given Republican control of the Congress after the 2000 10 and then the 2014 elections. They barely got the Affordable Care Act through by mustering every single Democrat. But after that, it was no longer possible, certainly not in the second term.
Next question. Can you tell me how the 13 keys to the White House went during the controversial 1876 election between Hayes and Tilden? I hear the incumbent Grant administration had scandal. That's the question.
Yeah, they did have scandal. That's an impossible election to parse out because we don't know who actually won that election. There was conflicted returns from Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida. It's always Florida. And Hayes, the Republican, had to win them all. Tilden, the Democrat, could have been elected by winning any one of them. But no one knew who really won. So, given that the Constitution is silent on this, they formed a commission. Congress did. It was supposed to be 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent from the Supreme Court, but the independent got elected to the Senate, couldn't serve, and the only remaining justice was a Republican, and every issue was decided 8-7. In fact, they called Rutherford B. Hayes old 8-7 or Rutherford B. Hayes. So, that was a very special circumstance in the waning days of Reconstruction. And to this day, no one has ever been able to figure out who really won that election.
Anita Loves Peaches says, what's your take on the history of tariffs in the McKinley era versus now in comparison with Trump?
Well, Trump wants to go back to the McKinley era. Republicans say we are the party of free enterprise, right? But Sam, what is the biggest impediment to free enterprise you can come up with?
Tariffs.
Tariffs couldn't be more destructive of government intervention in the markets, but really, under McKinley, that was the most important fundamental Republican policy. It wasn't until the election of Woodrow Wilson in 1912 that Wilson reversed course and slashed tariffs. In fact, his first big message to Congress was on the tariff. Then when Harding, the Republican, won again in 1920, they raised tariffs once again. So Trump is really hearkening back to the era of McKinley, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover.
Member Hey Mr. Lewis says, do you think do you think Harris is losing voters due to the conflict in Gaza and Lebanon now?
Who knows? That's an impossible question to answer.
Okay. Ian Matheru says, why did the 2000 election come down to one state as opposed to 4 years earlier? Did the impeachment scandal put people off? Was it Gore's reluctance to let Clinton campaign? Did Gore not run enough on the booming economy? Was it the changing demographics? What happened?
Probably all of the above, but the critical thing was, of course, the scandal, which enabled George W. Bush to campaign on restoring integrity to the White House. And then the Ralph Nader vote. He got 110,000 votes in Florida. I'm not saying they all would have gone to Gore, but in an election decided by 537 votes, there would have been more than enough net votes for Gore to win. Plus, as I proved in my report to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, still up on their website, you can check it out, the wrong man was elected in Florida. Based on the intent of the voters, Gore should have won Florida and the presidency by tens of thousands of votes, but didn't because of the disproportionate rejection of ballots cast by 95% African Americans. And no one knows this, hardly, but I think I've mentioned this before to our audience. Most of those invalidated black ballots were not the hanging chads or dimples. Do you know what they were, Sam? The rejected black ballots, mostly, not
Yes.
hanging chads. What?
Yes. Yes. Uh, Gosh,
Come
we
on.
did a video on this, but now I'm
We
blanking.
did.
I can't.
Overvotes, where
Right,
they
right.
didn't trust the system, and they shouldn't. Presidential candidate's brother was running the state. So they punched in Gore in those strange punch card machines. I have one here in my closet, actually. And just to make sure they wrote in Gore. Could not mistake their intention. Tens of thousands of those African American ballots were tossed and not recounted.
All right, we're only going to do a couple more questions because I have a fantasy basketball draft that I need to get to.
You have a
Um,
what?
a fantasy basketball draft that I need to get to.
Oh, that's important.
Well, I can't miss it.
How are the Yankees doing? Well, we can check
Oh,
it out later.
let's do it. Yeah, we can do an update on the Yankee score. Let's see. Um, Yankees, it's 4-2 Yankees, bottom of the sixth.
All right. So there's hanging in there.
Hanging in there. FN Music Man says, do you agree that Harris getting exactly 270 electoral votes is almost a certainty for challenges, delays, shenanigans among red states?
They'll try, but doesn't mean they're going to win. Trump tried last time, launched some 60 cases, lost them all except for one irrelevant case, lost them in front of Republican appointed judges, Trump appointed judges, got nowhere. So, yes, of course they'll try, but that doesn't mean they'll succeed. And remember, the Democrats control the presidency, unlike last time, and it will be Harris counting the votes.
Right, that's a big difference. All right, last question of the night is from Kokestaban1. They say, Professor, what do you make of the fact that according to the polls, Trump is gaining ground with Hispanics and African Americans? It's very hard to comprehend.
It is hard to comprehend, but again, you've heard me say this many times. When you try to parse out those small subgroups, the error margins are big enough for the entire electorate. But when you're talking about a small subgroup, 10, 15%, the error margin is enormous. Plus, there's a history of minorities, saying one thing and then coming back to the Democrats when they actually vote.
All right, we will start to wrap up. Unfortunately, there's no Lichtman Live post show because, as I said, I have a fantasy basketball draft tonight. I want to give some shout outs to some people. Shout out to Linda for becoming a member, Triple Play Vintage for becoming a member, Pragmatic B, Carol Hannon, Trina LD for your donation, Lawrence Richardson, thank you for your donation, John Cole, thank you for your donation. Let's see, who else? Victor Fuentes, Krasimir Boyanov, Miguel Angel. Who else is here? I just want to make sure that you all know that I appreciate you all for your donations. So I just want to give you all shout outs if you did donate or became a member. Dan Jackson, Angus, Lillian Velez, John F., Stephanie Schmidt gifted a membership. Thank you so much. Jamie C., Claire F., Matt Davidson, and David Deal. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We truly appreciate it. Tonight was a great stream. Great to have those numbers up again.
It's wonderful. Of course, I have a final word, right?
Why can't I?
You're going to say that, I know.
Say that. All right, Dad, what's your final word to the people?
My final word is, can't tell you how to vote, but you should vote. And you know what? If you want to make sure your vote counts, vote now. Vote early. Don't wait till election day, so to speak. Anything could happen on any one day. Get your vote in. Make sure you count.
All right. With that, good night.
Good night.